What's going on, everybody? Welcome. This is the Hustle Pod on Wager Talk TV. We're dealing with a very fluid situation, as you can tell. 2, not 4 this week, but luckily one of those 2 is my good buddy, Adam Trigger, joining me here on a Wednesday evening. Trig, I skipped the Guardians day game today to be here. Wouldn't you know the game went over, oh, by the way, without me in the stadium. But, hey, man, it's just you and me holding down the fort today, talking some AFC South. We'll have some best bets for the people. How are you doing today? Please, we need to fill time. It's a good thing you and I know how to talk.
Yeah, I was going to say this show will still end up running the same amount of time, probably. Like, yeah. You know, we end up rambling for most of it anyway. I'm doing great. I know you don't want to hear why. I know, like, off air. You know, I'm doing great because the Brewers won, and I know that like pains you, but I needed that 4% MLB winner because I had lost a few in a row. I hit KBO this morning, so I actually feel awesome right now, Brian. I've got another one tonight. I hope I win that, and I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I just tweeted out before we kind of just started preparing for the show. The Brewers have 11 wins this season when they score 3 runs or less. That's it. I mean, it makes sense, right? Teams usually don't win when they score 3 or less. 5 of those 11 wins came this month against the Reds. So that's baseball for you, everybody. But look, we've got some. Well, first of all, I believe we need to have a word from our sponsor, don't we, Mr. Trigger?
Yeah, I could never do the Viva Reed justice like Drew Martin Betts does it. He'll be back, and he'll do it at some point. All you need to know is that Viva's fucking awesome. That's all you need to know. This stuff, I'm not even a seltzer guy, and I actually enjoy drinking this drink. Okay, like I'm making this up. I don't have a read. The point is, it's really good. You can drink it all day. It doesn't get boring, and it doesn't even taste like tequila that much. Like I was telling you off air, the first time I ever tried it, CT and I went to Patriots Browns. We roll up to Foxborough with a massive cooler, and I think I had 11 before kickoff, and I wasn't even really phased. So you can drink it all day, hot day, great for the golf course. I actually think that should be the Viva Reed now going forward. I think that gets the point home a little bit more than like 88 calories, 0 sugar, whatever the rest of it is. So Viva Tequila Seltzer. There it is.
Look, I've drank a few in my day, Vivas and otherwise, so I know what I'm talking about when it comes to a nice alcoholic beverage, and Viva is where it's at. You heard the man. He said it is effing awesome. I'm not going to drop a second F-bomb because I don't want to screw up our YouTube algorithm here. But
remember, Brian, Kelly is on the show. We've allotted ourselves 3.5 swear words a show. And so I used one of them. I don't think we're going to go over, though, because her or Chris are not on today. So
okay, well, the Houston Texans offense will come up. I'm sure that there's some descriptions there. But speaking of the Houston Texans, you want to get into the AFC South because that's I guess what we came here for. If you don't want to get into it, I don't know what you want to talk about. So AFC South, it's an interesting division. The Jags came out of nowhere last year. Won it with just 9 wins. The other 3 teams are pretty lousy, particularly down the stretch. How are you looking at these 4 teams? Jags, Titans, Colts, Texans. Give us some actionable info, please, sir.
Well, first, I want to ask you a question just off the top. I just want to see if it's a yes or no answer, because I have an answer for this. Does the AFC South have one of the top 10 teams in the NFL? I know my answer. I want to see what your answer is. Do they have one of the top 10 teams in the NFL in this division?
They could. What a gutless answer that was, but they could. This is a hard division to handicap because the top 2 teams are kind of tied together. For me,
see, I was going to say no. For me, it's a hard no. I don't think there's a top 10 team in this division. But interestingly enough, this is what's going to happen in this division. Their schedules are very easy, so you're going to have a situation, I think, where someone's got a win-loss record that's reflective of a very, very good team, because they play each other and they play, I think it's the South maybe. So like most of these teams have relatively easy schedules, I think, on paper. And you're going to get a scenario where like whoever's fortunate enough to like string the wins together is going to be sitting there like 6 or 7-2. And then I'm going to have like a Stu Feiner game of my life fade in like week 10 against whoever that team is. We don't know who it is yet against whoever that team is. But Bryan, I want to start quick with the Texans because you brought them up. This is the team I think I'm highest on from a betting standpoint in this division, because I actually think the Texans are an average football team. Like, if you look at this team, I think they have a chance to be an average football team. And they've been a very, very bad football team for the past few years. So when I'm looking at betting against the number, I look and I say, okay, they had a good draft. They have a quarterback that might actually be able to play the position, which they haven't had since Deshaun Watson. And, there's a decent offensive line. I love my offensive lines. And I think they're respectable. They bring in Shaq Mason, is the acquisition that they had. And they're pretty good on the defensive side of the ball. They move up to draft Anderson, so that's an improvement. I think they overall improve their defense, but I think they still get priced like a bottom feeder. So I don't know that there's a future bet here, with the Texans, but certainly week to week, they've got to have some value. And that's what I'm really interested in, is who's going to give me betting value week to week. So I'm kind of in on the Texans, Bryan. I think they could surprise this year.
Yeah, they're definitely better. You just look, they're projected for 6.5 wins. But when I look at that future, it reminds me kind of Chicago over in the NFC, where it's like, okay, we know the Texans are going to win more games this year, but are they going to be 4 games better? I don't know. Like, I agree with you that I think the Texans could be a live dog week to week in certain spots. 7 wins may be a bridge too far. Let's bring up the fact, first-time head coach, first-time play caller, and a rookie quarterback. Typically, there's some growing pains there. And we'll talk about the Colts in a little bit. The Colts, they had a terrible turnover margin, right? And turnover margin is one of those stats that kind of vacillates wildly year to year, or can, at least sometimes. Houston did not exactly have the worst turnover margin last year. They were only -1. They also had no wins outside the division last year. That probably is not going to happen again. They didn't have any wins by more than 1 score. Now, Ryans is not a lame duck, unlike his 2 predecessors, Lovie Smith and, I can't remember the guy's name. David Culley, wasn't that the guy before him? Like, those guys were clearly one-year lame ducks. They're going to be better this year for sure. I agree with you. I just don't know if they're going to be 4 wins better. You mentioned that they've, struggled the last several seasons. I think it's been 3 years in a row with 4 wins or less. Can they win 5? Can they win 6 this year? Yeah, maybe. I would not be running to the window to bet them over 6.5 though.
So I want to address the comment right there. CJ Stroud is trash. So here's the thing though with Stroud and on this team. Like, he's a rookie. There's not going to be a ton expected of him, and he really doesn't have receivers here, which could be an issue. But what he does have is legs. He can move, and he's got a good offensive line. And I think that, I'd rather roll the dice with the good offensive line and the hopes that, I still think running backs and receivers are, I don't want to say a dime a dozen, not for the really good ones, but someone's going to probably step up as a receiver that we didn't know was a good receiver coming into the season. Mm-hmm. Just look at last year. Dameon Pierce had a great season for the Texans last year. I don't think anyone thought Dameon Pierce was going to be that going into last year. But if you have a good offensive line, now at least Pierce can give you a little bit in the run game, and some playmaker steps up. I feel like Stroud, that puts Stroud at least in a position to potentially succeed. Now, whoever he could be trash. We don't really know yet, but I just feel like he's at least going to be, the offensive line is going to give him the ability to maybe run, pick up yardage on a broken play, might give him more time to throw, far more so than a team with a poor offensive line that then you're putting pressure on a young guy to have to kind of do it all. So I don't think this Texans team is in the worst situation ever. Their defense wasn't terrible last year. That's the thing. Their defense wasn't terrible. They upgrade with a pass rusher now with Anderson. I just think they got better. I think they got better, and they got better, far better than the market's going to give them credit for. I guess is the overall point I'm trying to make here, which is going to make them a good bet, in my opinion, week to week.
Just to put you on the spot here, I don't know if you've even talked about the game on any of the shows here, but plus 9.5 week 1 against Baltimore, is that too many points, you think?
Yeah, probably. I think think I said last week when we talked about AFC North that I have the Ravens fourth in that division. It's a very good division, and I'm high on the Browns and the Steelers. Obviously, Bengals. Everyone's going to have the Bengals power rated 1 in that division. So it really comes down to the other 3 teams. But yeah, I think that's probably too many points. Now, I don't really. I need to see the preseason, and you've got 3 weeks. Injuries could occur. I'm not a big fan of betting the week 1 games before the preseason, only because, there could be teams end up taking catastrophic injuries sometimes in the preseason. Less now with 3 weeks and the fact that they protect the starters. But I still like to at least see the teams play. But yeah, I don't hate that. I couldn't talk you off that right now if you wanted to play Texans there.
Okay, speaking of catastrophic, do we want to switch gears to a different team here? Because the Indianapolis Colts, I think we all remember the perfect encapsulation of their 2022 season. It was a cold Saturday in December, at least it was cold here in Cleveland, against the Minnesota Vikings, where noted Andy Lang lookalike Jeff Saturday was on the sidelines, and they blew that huge lead against Minnesota. They still wound up covering in overtime. I think you had them. I know I had them that day. But, a historic blown lead for Indianapolis. This was an inept team down the stretch. They, too, have kind of wiped the slate. New coach. They had all those years, in my adult life of Peyton Manning. And then, they had the one bad year. Then Andrew Luck comes in. They had such quarterback stability. 5 years in a row with a different week 1 starter for the Colts. It's a new coach. Anthony Richardson, I have questions about him coming into this league. He had a very low completion percentage in college. I think it was like 54%. Now, admittedly, okay, I'll be honest, this was pre-wager talk for me. But Josh Allen, his completion percentage wasn't so good coming out of college, and I was wrong about him, obviously. But the Colts are a team like the Texans that I think will improve. They'll win more games this year. But I don't think they're going to get to like a playoff level. Your thoughts?
Well, Bryan, first I got to tell you a quick story about that Colts-Vikings game. So I am in Gabriel's Gate, which is it's a bar in Buffalo. Great wings. There's great wings all over Buffalo, obviously. But you know what I'm saying? It's a bar in Buffalo, and one of the more underground, people like locals are like, got to go here and stuff like that. Really cool sports bar too. I have the Colts plus, what was it, 3.5? I think that was the spread in that game.
Yes.
The Colts Vikings game. For my life, I'm in this bar, and it was like a 30-point game. So I'm hanging out with some people. We're going to Bills Dolphins later that night. That's why we're in Buffalo. So I'm just hanging out. I'm with Mallory's brother. We're going to the game. And I pretty much was like, this game's over. Like, whatever. So I stopped watching it, of course. I look up, and like where we were, I couldn't even really see the TV. So I look up now, it's a 2-score game. And so now I kind of relocate myself to like be able to see the TV, and I'm watching. And then now it's a 8-point game, and I'm just like guaranteed 2-point conversion coming here after they score this touchdown. Around the same time, this guy walks in, of course, and it was packed, right? So it's crowded, stands right next to me and Eric. And I didn't even say hi. I wasn't even talking to him. And he made sure to tell me that he put $10 on the Vikings money line at halftime. And he was like going nuts. We're not going to unit shame on the show here, but going nuts. And then they scored, and he's going nuts. Like, he wants me to get it. Like, he wants me to be happy for him. And I'm just standing there, and I'm just like, and I had to grind out the whole overtime with that guy right there. His $10 ticket, and it worked out. He won. I won. I had 3.5. But man, have you ever been in that spot, Bryan, where you have to like sit there and just like pretend you don't want to,
Oh no, well, so that's why I stopped. So before we bought our house and whatever, like I would go to like this when we lived in the city. I would go to this sports bar that just had like the Sunday Ticket that had just a wall of TVs, and I could just sit there and just watch every game simultaneously. But part of the reason I stopped going to that was like I would go there, and like I'm on like a lot of ugly underdogs, right? And everybody else in the bar was on every public favorite, and I was like, dude, I don't want to like watch these games, and I'm like cheering against everyone. It reminds me the other night I was out with a couple buddies during the Phillies Guardians game. Okay, I live here in Cleveland. I had the Phillies, so that I was pretending that I wasn't on the Phillies, and like everyone got so fired up when they dropped the ball on in that 1-0 game, and I just yelled out the biggest "fuck" you've ever heard. So there you go. There's two, by the way. We've got one more. So
we still have one and a half to work.
Okay. All right. The Indianapolis Colts. I don't know how we got off that, but look, I think they're going to improve their league worst turnover margin, -13, and their red zone defense was atrocious last year. That's another stat that can vacillate. They're going to have to pull a few upsets to go over 6.5 wins. I think they're only going to be favored in a handful of games. Can they go over 6.5? Can they get to the 500? Or what can they do?
So, Brian, I think this is like an interesting sort of dynamic with this division. Any of these teams can go over their win total because all of their schedules are weak because they play each other. That's my honest thought about this division is any of these teams can go over their win total because someone has to win someone has to win the divisional games, right? And so for that reason and the fact that the NFC conference they're playing is also pretty weak in my opinion. Panthers, Bucks, even like Falcons and Saints, I have questions about. Any of these teams can go over their win total. Now, Colts are another team that I don't think they're the worst team in the league. And I think they're getting brought up in a lot of, I listen to a lot of just sports talk and what have you. I feel like they're getting called the worst team in the league or one of the worst teams in the league. And they might be that. Listen, I mean, Gardner Minshew's serviceable at best, right? Like assuming they go with him. That's obviously Anthony Richardson, 4th overall pick. He's the one that they would want in that position, but he's probably going to have to get his reps. It'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays out. But, again, the offensive line isn't terrible, which I do. And the other thing too here, Jonathan Taylor was hurt all year last year, had a very poor season dealing with an injury that was really nagging through the whole year. So what if Jonathan Taylor comes back as normal Jonathan Taylor that we all kind of, expected him to be? And last year, I think we would consider that was a bust year or a down year. And the offensive line is serviceable and they maybe can run the ball a little bit. Who knows? That's why, I'm not totally out on the Colts. The quarterback position could be a disaster, but a respectable offensive line gives you a chance. They signed Matt Gay, who was he's like an automatic kicker. And, when you're talking about covering spreads, having a guy a team that can go down and their drive fizzles out or they don't make plays, but they're just knocking down field goals, that will cover you a spread. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you're look at the Colts where you might be the 9.5 point dog in some games. If you've got a good kicker that knocks down 2-3 field goals and gets you points out of a couple of drives, usually a spread cover right there. So I don't hate the Colts. It could be a disaster, right? You never know. They could get Richardson could be in there. He could be totally raw, totally rookie, just rookie, learn on the fly. It could be a disaster, but I have more reason to believe that they're not the worst team or even the worst sort of 5 teams in the league. And if that's the case, they're probably going to be value from week to week. So why not take the points with a team like the Colts too? I don't mind the Colts as it pertains to how I think they're going to be priced in the market.
It's interesting. 2 teams that you've both times brought up. I don't think this is one of the necessarily worst teams in the league. Arizona's going to come into this year as the unanimous worst team in the league, right? Who is this? You ripped the Raiders hard last week for those who may have missed the program. Are they the second worst team in the league? Because as you've been talking, I've been thinking, well, who would I say is the second worst team in the NFL right now?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is it the Raiders? Who's the worst
Bryan,
team in the AFC? Okay.
Oh, for me, it's the Raiders until they prove otherwise. That's
okay.
I would not even hesitate with that answer. It's the Raiders until they give me a reason to not think so. For me.
Okay, there you go. All right, so I think there's a difference between the bottom 2 and the top 2 here. And I when you asked me at the top, do you think there's a top 10 team in this division? I said maybe, because I think Jacksonville could be a top 10 team if everything goes right. But I think there's if you look through history, there's definite signs that they might regress. Jacksonville, right? They're a team that jumped from 3 to 9 wins last year. More often than not, we see teams that do that it's called the plexiglass principle. Bill James coined that term in baseball. So they could regress. And if Jacksonville regresses, that opens the door for Tennessee. And I tweeted about the Titans last week when they signed DeAndre Hopkins. Okay. And I mentioned that the sharp money had been on the under for their win total so far, which is 7.5. And I'm not sure if I agreed with that. I always like to note where the sharp money is going, because this is a team that had been really good until just injuries took their toll, and they lost their last 7 games last year. Do you feel that that Tennessee and Jacksonville are sort of tied together, that Tennessee winning the division is sort of contingent on Jacksonville regressing, or can Tennessee pass a good Jacksonville team and still win this division?
So I do think I think Tennessee winning this division is somewhat contingent on Jacksonville regressing, but I think Jacksonville is going to regress because I look at this Jaguars team. I don't think there's any way they can. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is going to have to be an absolute menace for them to be as good as they were last year or to reach expectation, because this is a scenario where they actually have a poor offensive line, in my opinion. And Lawrence is going to have to play extremely well in spite of that. And they also didn't improve their defense, which was bad last year. So they did nothing to improve a bad defense in the offseason. And they have a questionable offensive line. Now, I mean, they've got Calvin Ridley's a great pickup. He's your number one receiver. Etienne's a nice playmaker. I like him. I think Lawrence is awesome. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is a phenomenal quarterback. There's no argument there. And he's probably he's the next sort of superstar quarterback in the line of great quarterbacks that have come up, in my opinion. But I think there's a lot working against him and the Jaguars. If the Jaguars clean up in these games and they don't slip up against they clean up against Texans, Colts, whatever, and they get wins that way. But I don't know that I trust the Jaguars in the role of expectation, favorite, etc. And that's the role they're going to be in this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know you look at Warren Sharp's preview guide. I think he's got them favored in 13 games this year. I mean, Jacksonville favored in 13 games. This is a team. I don't know about you, but I bet them a lot last year. I was tweeting #Duval quite a bit because they got hot. And they're the ones who took advantage of the Titans' misfortune. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence. He cut way down in his interceptions. Also, who in the world would argue with this? Doug Peterson over the just abysmal Urban Meyer. That at the NFL level, that's about as big of a coaching upgrade as you're going to see right there. From week 12 on, the Jags were a top 10 team in EPA, both offensively and defensively. I agree that I don't think they improved that defense at all. Offensively, they bring in Ridley. This could be a team that you want to bet the over on. It'll be, I don't have what the week 1 over-under line is, and I wouldn't bet it now anyway, but there's probably going to be a lot of points. This is one of 4 teams, Trig, that has a minus next to their name when it comes to division odds. They are a big favorite to win this division. It's a little too rich for my blood. I wouldn't bet them over 10.5 wins either. I just want no part of either of that. And like I said, my concern is you jump from 3 to 9 wins one season. Typically, there's regression in the following year. But I think it is on paper, at least, the most talented team in the AFC South. They weren't overly lucky last year. They actually had a losing record in 1-score games. Lost one to the Texans, lost one to the Colts. I think they were bottom 5 in fumble and field goal luck. You mentioned the easy schedule. They could take the next leap into the upper echelon, or they could regress. It's not something I want to get down on right now, though.
Brian, I would bet the no here if it was offered. If you can go, Circa might offer it. Some spots will offer it. I would bet the no on Jaguars to win the division. Now, I don't want to be tied to the Titans, right? So that's why I'm not saying to bet the Titans to win the division. I would rather, if you're saying that the Jaguars have a minus, if you can get plus money, no, on that, because they're going to probably be minus to win the division. I don't know what those splits are, but typically the no in this case might be around even money. I don't know. I'm not. It's hard to do those odds in my head, but I would be willing to fade the Jaguars winning this division because we're going to talk about the Titans, and this is actually the team I think that they obviously have the best chance of any of the other three teams. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. But I would still want the Texans in my back pocket, which is why I would like the no, right? Like, I don't know if, and of course, I mean, the Colts, like, again, it all comes down to the schedule and the fact that these teams are going to play each other. Like, if the schedule plays out where, you know, it plays out in the right way for the Colts, Texans, or Titans, where they can rattle off wins in this division, one of these teams is going to be sitting there at like 7-2, and you're going to be like, how is that team 7-2? But they're going to be, because maybe they got a win over the Panthers, and then they had home games against the Titans. I don't have the schedules in front of me, but they had home games against the Titans, Texans, Colts. All those games are manageable. Even a home game against the Jaguars is manageable. Like, I'm not like, how big of a favorite are the Jaguars going to be on the road? Not very big, probably, right? Like, in general with other entities.
Yeah, I mentioned that stat about like favored 13 times. There's a lot, but that's like if things go well. I think there's like almost half those games, like the number is like going to be 2 or less right now.
2.5,
projected. So there's a lot of there's a lot, even like 1. Like, so there's a lot of coin flip situations in there. With Tennessee's future, I just want to throw this out there. I would rather play them to win the division at like, I think it's like plus 400 or something. It's really high, rather than over the win total, because I think it's like boom or bust.
Oh yeah,
for the Titans. Yeah, like, and if you're going to tie up your bankroll on something, you might as well win more, because I think if the Titans exceed their win total, they're probably going to win the division. I want no part of that Jaguars minus 165, because as we've been saying now for the last half hour, there is a clear-cut case that each of the other 3 teams in this division are going to win more games in 2023 than they did in 2022. You look at Tennessee. This was a team, like we said, injuries destroyed them down the stretch. They had a skeleton crew in that last game against the Jaguars that decided the division. Mike Vrabel, though, okay, let's tip our cap to him. 22-9 against the number as a dog of a field goal or more. He has a winning straight-up record as a dog. That's impressive. They have 9+ wins, the Titans, in 4 straight years. Before last year, everything fell apart. They were 7-3. Trig, before they lost the last 7. They were in control of this division before injuries took their toll. My only concern is, one, people got excited with Hopkins. I think wide receiver acquisitions are typically overrated. I mean, I'm sure someone's going to bring up one that was good. I mean, T.O., I can't remember if that was a trade or a free agency. When he went to the Eagles, that was a big deal. But I mean, look, we brought up Odell Beckham last week. I think we talked about him, or like Devontae Adams in recent years, with people like, oh my God, what a great addition. And it like doesn't really bear out. Derrick Henry, at what point do the tires fall off the car? This guy's pushing 2,000 career carries. That's a lot. And the offensive line, you brought up offensive lines a lot, is bad. This is a bad offensive line in Nashville.
That's the concern for me with the Titans, is the offensive line. Now, it makes the point I was saying earlier. Like, I don't get excited about like an acquisition of a wide receiver the same way. That's why I'm okay with the Texans, right? That's why I'm okay with the Texans having no like legitimate receiver, because I'm like, well, it's just a receiver. Someone's going to step up and that we didn't know, and they're going to play well, and they'll become the sort of top receiver. The thing with the Titans is it's going to be the O-line. Like, that's the concern, because if they and I'll be watching that in the preseason and seeing if they can address any of those issues like internally, because if this team gets respectable offensive line play, they will win this division, in my opinion. If they don't, then it's going to be like any other team that has a poor offensive line. They're going to struggle. And I thought the Titans should have blown it up. I thought like it was time to move on from Henry and Tannehill and to go in a different direction. But this year in this division, having that sort of veteran presence of Tannehill, Henry, you throw Hopkins in as a veteran, might actually help them, because they only need to beat the Jaguars, Colts, and Texans, and like having like veterans who kind of know how to win. It's kind of like we talked about the Vikings. It's like, I don't like that Vikings team. They're going to regress from their win total of last year, almost certainly. But when you talk about like an alternative to the Lions in that division, it's like, well, at least like Minnesota's shown the ability to win and win these close games, whereas like the Bears and the Packers certainly haven't. It's kind of the same thing with the Titans. It's like Vrabel's shown, like their coaching staff has shown the ability to win, and if you're looking at an alternative to the Jaguars in this division, at least you know the Titans, like they've played enough winning football to think that if they can address the offensive, because that's the downfall here for me. I have it written on my handwritten notes, which I still write out every day. Don't like the offensive line. And that's a big thing for me, Brian. Like I've been saying it on every one of these previews. I like betting on teams with good offensive lines. I like to fade teams that are a mess in the trenches, both offensively and defensively. So as bad as I want to fade the Titans, and I probably will from a week-to-week standpoint, they might be a decent alternative to the Jaguars in this division because they know there's going to be games where they find a way to win. I'll tell you right now, they will find a way to win. Henry will do something like, I still think he's got something in the tank, and they'll find a way to win. Hopkins might make a big play. They just will. That's how I kind of look at this team.
The only other red flag I want to bring up, and you kind of touched on this, is the quarterback position with the Titans. I don't like, and obviously it's only the last week of July right now when we're talking about this. Maybe there'll be some more clarity as we roll into September. But like teams that have sort of an uncertain deal at quarterback, like is there going to be a push to kind of like get rid of Tannehill and like let's see what Will Levis can do? Last year people like remember the preseason last year, everyone thought Malik Willis was going to be so good, and then he played an actual NFL regular season game. You're like, my God. So that's something that like it just can cause. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but it's just not a great situation when you have uncertainty at the core. Who's your QB1?
So I think, Brian, to simplify how I would bet on this division would be like this. The Jaguars and the Titans are going to get priced as premium type options because the Jaguars are such a big favorite in the division and the Titans have a recent history of success. The Colts and the Texans are going to get priced as bottom feeder type options in the week-to-week betting market, at least until something. Now, if the Colts start 4-0, you have to reassess, right? Like if one of these teams goes off and starts off great, you have to reassess. But I can tell you right now, going into the early weeks in the season, Jaguars and Titans will be priced as premium options more so than they should be. Colts and Texans will be priced as terrible teams. And the over sort of the point I'm trying to make is these four teams are not that different from each other. From Jaguars to Texans to Titans to Colts, they're middling teams at best. Well, the Jaguars at best are a top 10 team. But I would say most of these teams are middling to not very good in this division. That's kind of how I'm looking at the division, with the Jaguars obviously having the highest ceiling. I mean, if they get defensive play and good offensive line play, they could be a top 10 team. But I think I put them more in the middle of the pack just based on where I think they're going to be.
Titans plus 350 to win the division, Colts plus 600, Texans plus 800. Would you sprinkle a little bit? I know you don't really like futures, but would you sprinkle a little bit of pizza money on like the other three teams besides the Jaguars and just like, I mean, that's the way to play it.
That's why I want to see me. We got to call Jeff and see if he'll put up a no. You probably get better odds on no at Circa. I'm sure they have it.
Yeah.
Like that's why you would play the no, because you would most likely get better odds on a no bet. Will the Jaguars win the division? No, than you would be by playing those three. So that's why I said the no is probably a good bet. You get all three of those teams. You get three cracks at beating the Jaguars, a team that could end up, they lose a few games. You never know. I mean, Trevor Lawrence could be the best quarterback in the world. If that offensive line is in tatters, what's he going to do? Right? Like that's tough to overcome. So yeah, I would fade the Jaguars in this division. There's too many pitfalls for that team to make me think that they're the odds-on favorite to win this division. Like they're clearly have the most talent, Brian. Like no one's going to dispute that.
For sure.
They have the most talent, but they also have a lot of areas they could potentially slip up, in my opinion.
Let's do a hard right turn to best bets. What do you say? You got KBO, right? I've got a game over on this side of the Pacific. Major League Baseball tonight. AL West Lone Star Series. We're taking a look at Texas and Houston here. Okay. I think you might see this my way, Trig. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Houston's opened this series by winning two competitively priced games, both by one run, 10-9 and 4-3. With those 2 victories now, just 1 game off the division lead. That's something the Rangers have been in first, it seems like, all year, right? But I look at this line for today. The Astros are big favorites with Valdez on the mound. I think they're overpriced. And I know, Valdez has been good. He was an all-star. He's among the AL leaders and stuff like quality starts and innings pitched and ERA. But I'm not sure if you've noticed out there, Texas, they can hit, okay? They lead all of baseball in runs scored. They have the top run differential still. They're second in all of MLB in WRC plus against lefties. And Valdez has kind of struggled his last 3 starts. 5.71 ERA. His lone start against Texas this season, admittedly, all the way back in April. The Astros lost as big home favorites, 9-1. And, the Rangers, I know Heaney has not been in top form recently, but what has he done against the Astros this year? 2 starts, 10 scoreless innings, allowing just 5 hits. Today's best, but glad that Robert isn't producing today's show because oh boy, there we go. That's what Robert would be doing if he was producing. Because I said Texans under 6.5, and I'm betting against the Astros today. But I value is too much up here in Texas and Houston. I would back the Rangers plus 157. Today's best bet.
Brian, I got to be honest. It was the Rangers plus 1.5 would have been a best bet for me about if it was 10 cents cheaper. If I could have got Rangers plus 1.5 in this scenario with everything you just laid out in the minus 120 to 125 range, it would have been on my client card. But minus 135, minus 140, like, listen, from a one-off standpoint, like, yeah, I like just as much, but it's like I know I can't just come out and lay minus 140 on plus 1.5 and win long term. So I have to be, disciplined enough to not do that. And that's why it's not a client play. But from a matchup standpoint, Rangers plus 1.5 makes all the sense in the world. And so I endorse your best bet for the show, Brian. I'm with you there. I like the Rangers.
All right. You want to take us to a little KBO, buddy?
Yeah, listen, so I don't have a client KBO play for the morning, and it happens sometimes, right? Like, it's a 10-team league. There's 5 games. So I'm not always going to have a client best bet in KBO, but this is one of those scenarios where, and this gets thrown around sometimes in sports betting, where like a minus 190, or I think this might be up to minus 200, is probably value. And you'll see it in these smaller leagues. Like, the SSG Lando should be like minus 360 in this game. Like, you know what I mean? Like over $3, in my opinion, based on the set of circumstances that this game will be essentially be played under. So if you're seeing like minus 180, minus 190, even minus 200 on the SSG Landers, it's a good bet. And if you can't stomach minus 200, this might be a situation, since they're the road team, where I'd say, all right, roll the dice with minus 1.5, because at least you're going to get all 9 of your at-bats to potentially cover the run line. The reason this is such a good spot for SSG is not, in addition to being the worst team in the league, Samsung Lions are the worst team in the league, they're far and away the worst team against left-handed pitching, and they run into Kwang Hyun Kim, former St. Louis Cardinal, had success in Major League Baseball. He's 35 years old now. He's taken a little bit of a step back, but I mean, he's still a dominant left-handed pitcher in this league. So they're going to have to deal with a dominant lefty, and they don't hit left-handed pitching. On top of that, they used 6 relievers yesterday. They have a bullpen ERA over 5, 9th in ERA in KBO bullpen ERA. But this team's got by far the worst high leverage relievers in the league. They really don't have a closer. Their closer, Sangwon Oh, another big leaguer who's just been like, the manager went to take him out a couple weeks ago. He fired the ball into the stands. Like, he just doesn't want, I don't think he wants to be there. He's been ineffective. He got pulled from the closer role. So it's really been a mess for Samsung pitching wise. And they don't have a 5th starter right now. So they are being forced to go with a bullpen game a day after cooking their whole bullpen in a 9-8 or 8-7 game with like 30 hits. One of those games where like every reliever under the sun is used. And now they're going to have to go with a bullpen game. And they don't have the bullpen arms to do that. So in my opinion here, I think Samsung is looking at this and saying, yeah, it's SSG, one of the best teams in the league. Kwang Hyun Kim, a legend in Korea, legendary KBO pitcher. And I think they're just going to look at it and say, you know what? Like, hey, if we hit him, great. If not, we're just going to throw our scrub relievers out there and live to fight another day, because we got to play 3 more games this weekend that are more winnable games than this one. So under those circumstances, SSG in this spot should probably be like minus 350. So if you're seeing minus 180, minus 190, minus 200, I'm not going to give it out as a client play because I don't do that. I don't like to lay $2 on a play that like people are going to pay for. But it's a good, like, just bet accordingly, right? Like bet it like, a little bit smaller, so you're not at risk, because it's KBO game, anything can happen. Like any bullpen can get blown up. Even SSG's is pretty good, but man, is the deck stacked against the Samsung Lions in this game. So SSG Landers at just about any money line is probably good here.
Give me the SSG Landers. All right, there we go there. Best bets. You heard the Landers. I'm on Texas. There you go. As Trig projected, we went the same amount of time with just the two of us. That was an easy bet. If any sportsbook was taking that, you should have bet yes 45 minutes ago. But look, I want to remind everyone, like, comment, subscribe here to the Wager Talk YouTube page. There is a new program, by the way, on the Wager Talk YouTube page called the Power 5. I will give you one guess who hosts that show. It is every morning, Monday through Friday. I break down a number of things on the Major League Baseball slate, so please check that out. I have a 4% best bet for tonight in Major League Baseball. Is there anything else you'd like to promote, Adam Trigger, before we take this baby home?
I also have a 4% play tonight in Major League Baseball. And then I guess we should shout out the fact that we'll be in Vegas in a couple of weeks. And
yes.
It's not as big of a production as our meet and greet from last year, but let me get my calendar out here, Brian, so I get the date correct.
It is August 17th through the 20th. I know that because the 17th is my birthday.
There we go. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot. We're celebrating your birthday when we're out there. That's awesome. So, yeah, it's Brian Power's birthday, so it's gonna go off the rails at some point. And
it won't go that off the rails, though. I'll tell you that right now.
I don't know. You weren't out in August last year. It goes off the rails pretty quickly.
Well,
yeah. But I think we're doing like a circus swim thing, like type thing on Saturday. Basically, we'll be around hanging out all weekend. We're going to be over at Circa. I think, people are going to stay at the D or Circa or anywhere on Fremont. And it was we had a blast last year. We had a blast in March for the people that came out to Turning Stone in March. It's basically, we just hang around and bet games and have a good time. And it's fun. So if you are in Las Vegas or want to come to Las Vegas and hang out, it's the 17th through the 20th, I think, is when we're going to be there. So
absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. And then, of course, Viva Tequila Seltzer. I don't have I'm not going to do my read from earlier, even though it was fantastic. But Viva Tequila Seltzer, follow him at Viva Seltzer on Twitter. We'll end it on that.
As Mrs. Power likes to say, elderberry, that is a very healthy option indeed. Tastes great, too. All right, he is Adam Trigger. I am Bryan Power. This was the Hustle Pod on Wager Talk TV. I'll see y'all in the morning. Peace.